is for the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative. I'm going to share my screen and just go through the flyer that we have sent out, just so that we have it on a recording. So everybody should have already received this flyer, and if you can read it, if it's big enough, you can see that the virtual training is happening right now, June 7th, and then there's another one tomorrow, June 8th at noon. And then this Saturday at 1 p.m. we're doing a round of data collection for the general public, and there's some other events happening that day, and if you have questions about it, you can reach out to Kyla or Nikki. And the intent is to get as much data as collected from this Saturday, June 11th through July 17th. And so there are maps that we'll go through, and Catherine's going to take it on from here to help people understand how to use that app. Pass it back over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Let me get my slides up here. All right, so I'm going to run through just a little bit of context on why we're collecting this data, and then I will jump into the actual training of how we're collecting this data. So the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative is a collaboration between MRCTI, where Jenny's from, and the UN Environment Program North America office, as well as us at the University of Georgia with our Debris Tracker app. The goal is to obviously understand more about plastic pollution in the Mississippi River, in the Mississippi River Basin. So quite a large area that we're trying to collect data on. Globally, we know that plastic, 79% of plastic that's ever been created has ended up in landfills in the natural environment. So that's a significant proportion of plastic that is ending up in the natural environment, and certainly an important issue to understand better to be able to prevent that. So there was a paper published by Dr. Jambeck in 2015 that estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic are going into the ocean every year. This is based on 2010 data. So as if the projections continue, this number would be higher today. However, this number is based on coastal population. So there's a gap in understanding how plastic is moving from our communities inland along riverways into the ocean ecosystem. This is a recent study that came out that looked at plastic in the US, plastic pollution in the US, and noted that the US is ranked #1 in plastic waste generation. So while typically the US might not be targeted in some of the bigger conversations around ocean plastic pollution, it's a very significant contributor, especially in terms of plastic waste generation. And that's where the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative started the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative, and where this project comes in. So with the goal of understanding how plastic is moving from our inland communities along the riverway into the ocean. And the tool we're using to do that is called Debris Tracker. So Debris Tracker is a free open source citizen science app that was developed in 2010 in collaboration with the University of Georgia and the NOAA Marine Debris Program. And we've since expanded, and we're now powered by Morgan Stanley and continue to grow around the world. So I'll talk a little bit about some of our reach there, but quickly the structure of this training will be highlighting what Debris Tracker is. We'll go through some very specific guidance on how to actually use the app. We'll talk about the surveying method that we're planning to use in Rosedale and Greenville, which we've also used in other cities along the Mississippi River. And then we'll talk about some other ways to engage and collect data if you can't follow those specific surveying protocols. So first, starting with what is Debris Tracker? So as I said, a free open source app developed back in 2010. As people log data with the app, it creates a global map of plastic pollution. So every data point is a specific point in space and time that shows exactly where a litter item was, which is a very scientifically robust set of data to be able to analyze how plastic pollution is ending up in the environment and how it's moving as well. Today, we have over 5 million items logged in over 90 different countries around the world, which we're really proud of that expanding and growing data set and excited to continue growing it in the Mississippi River Basin as well. I will say that a lot of this data that's been collected so far is coastal data, as we were talking about the focus on that. Coastal areas being a focus of plastic pollution rather than inland areas. So this project is really filling an important gap in capturing data in more inland communities as well. As I was saying, the app is also open source, so all of the data that's collected you can view and explore yourself on our data platform. Obviously, we'll also compile reports to give back to the communities with the data from this initiative, but you can, before those reports are even ready, you can see the data in almost real time as it's uploaded. You can search by organization and date range, and then we have a new feature where you can even draw a box around an area to highlight a specific city that you want to look at. And then you can search by that data, and you'll get a breakdown of categories as well as a breakdown of top items and a map of where those items were collected. So you can see here in this little map some of what the transects look like when they're collected in the field. So you can see the little dots. Those are the unique geospatial data points of all the litter items. And we call them our litter caterpillars, as they kind of look like little caterpillars going along the road there. But the goal of collecting those transect data is to really answer these three questions. What is it? So obviously collecting the data on what is actually there. But then by connecting that litter data with its geospatial location of knowing exactly where in space and time it is, we're able to start to look at the question number 2 of how did they get here? And then obviously through conversations with the community, through sharing this data and through making it open source, we're able to start addressing question number 3 of together, what can we do about it? So now we'll jump into specifics on how to actually collect this data. So I'm gonna run this little video here that will show exactly how to collect data. So this is what the home screen of the app looks like once you're logged in. If you haven't logged in before, you'll have to create an account with your email address before you can log in, but this is what your home screen will look like. And you'll go down to select an organization, and you'll choose this Mississippi River Plastic Pollution / MRCTI list. You can see on this list, you'll see the top trackers, the different groups that are participating in different cities along the river. But once you click on the list, you'll get a message if you want to continue, and then you'll see the list load, and it'll open all this list of different items that you might find in the environment. So you can see they're broken down by category. You can use this button here over on the side to expand or collapse those different categories and explore what's there. I think one of the easiest ways to find items, though, is to search for them, which you can see up at the top. Once you actually find an item, you can use this plus or minus button to change the number. So for example, we often find 10 cigarette butts in one spot. So you can use this plus or minus to change the number. You can also actually, if there's a ton of cigarette butts in one spot, you can click on that number and type in what you see. So for example, if you have 50 bottle caps in one location, that's an easy way to log that quickly. You'll see once you click add that number will get added into this manage items tab where you can keep track of everything down at the bottom. So as I was saying, I think the search is one of the easier ways to find items, even more so than the categories. And one important addition that we're asking people to collect data on for the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative specifically is the brand data. So we want to know who we need to bring to the conversation around plastic pollution in these communities. And so it's really an important addition to collect the brands of items that we find in the environment. So to do that, you click this icon and it will open up this description box, and there you can type in the brand of the item. Obviously, not every item will have an identifiable brand, but where it is identifiable, we are asking people to take the time to type in that brand data so we can know who we need to bring to the table around these conversations. Again, once you click add, you'll see that added down in the manage items below. Another thing to highlight is that if there's an item that's not on this list, you can use the other category to include that. So there's others of all the different material types. So if you know that it's metal, but it's not an item in the list, you can put it under other metal. If it doesn't fall into any of those material types, you can put it under other, and you can use that same description box to type in the item if it's not available in the list. I definitely recommend before you go out in the field, taking the time to read through the list of items and just looking what's on there and have a little bit of familiarity with the items on the list. And then another thing I'll highlight is this accumulation area item. So every now and again, we'll see very large areas of trash that are accumulated that fall outside the realm of our transects to collect data, but we want to also make sure we highlight those kind of hotspot areas. So if you see an accumulation area, for example, an informal dumping site, or maybe a canal or a creek that's filled with trash, we're asking people to log what they saw there and to estimate the length and width of that area in feet. Again, this helps us keep track of those hot spots that we're finding in the environment. So same thing here, typing in the description box that you can expand by clicking on the icon. Alrighty. And then there's also a test item, which is helpful if you want to play around with the app but don't want to mess up any data sets being submitted. You can use that test item to do that. And then finally, I'll mention one of my favorite features, which is the favorite section. So this is a customizable section that you create of top items in the app. So all you do to add an item to favorites is hold down this add button, and you'll see it gets put at the top of the list here in your own custom favorite section. So I like to go ahead and set up my favorite section before I start tracking and put cigarette butts, bottles, food wrappers, things that are very common that I find a lot in that section. And then it's really easy to log those items because you see them right at the top there. Same thing to remove an item from the favorites. You just hold down that add button and you'll remove the item from favorites there. All right. So this is the Manage Items tab. So I clicked on that and you can see the points that were logged there. You can delete items here if you log anything accidentally that you didn't mean to log. So because this is a test, I'm going to go through and delete all the items besides the test item. So now you can just see that one test item under the Manage Items. And then another important piece is our survey that we have at the end here. So this is really helpful to be able to do some additional analysis that really helps us get at that question of why that litter is ending up there. So we're asking folks to answer some questions on the type of site, the land use, if they picked up the litter, and some additional questions on if they have other observations to share. Another thing to note is that you can add photos of the litter that you find to the app. That's not required, it's completely optional. But you can do that if you have photos you want to share. And then once you're done, you'll see these two options, the upload session and upload later. So if you have access to data or Wi-Fi, you can go ahead and use the upload session to submit it to our database. If you want to upload it later, if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, you can use the upload later button to save it. So you can actually use the app completely offline as long as you've opened it up before and loaded that list. I recommend doing that on Wi-Fi the first time, just because it takes a little bit to load all those icons and items. But then after that, you can use the list completely offline. If you go ahead and upload the session, you'll see that it will start to, if you click that upload session button, you'll see it'll upload the images, it'll upload your data, and you'll get a green check mark at the end, which means that your data was successfully uploaded. So there you go. And then I'll also run back to the sprint and show you, if you do upload the session later, it ends up in this little cloud right here. All you have to do to upload it is click on that cloud, it'll open up the session and you can click upload there. Alrighty, so that's how to use the app. A couple quick considerations is to make sure you're enabling location while you're using the app. Obviously, in order to collect that scientific geospatial data on litter, we're relying on the cell phone to ping the GPS. So we do need to enable the location. If you're going to upload photos, you can allow photo access as well. Again, that's completely optional. And we don't use your location or photo data for anything besides what you submit through our database. Alrighty, so now I'll run through some surveying protocols of how to track in the app. First, I'll reference our guidelines for tracking litter, which are in our field guide that is available online. Maybe Jenny, if you're able to drop that link in the chat, and if not, when we post this, we'll certainly provide a link to that as well. But the basic guidelines, we've talked about some of them about how to identify other items and how to tag accumulation areas. But one other important one is that we're only recording items that are over about an inch in diameter. So you don't need to count the teeniest, tiniest fragments that you see, just things that are, I say, about the size of a cigarette butt or larger. You can track those things. So you don't have to include every item. All right, so how to actually track those litter transects. So we've created maps for both Rosedale and Greenville that include sample sites that were randomly generated across the city. So these small yellow squares are the priority sampling areas that we're asking people to go to. We realize we might not get all of these, and that's okay, but we're trying to just give people different areas to be spread out within the city, and as I said, they're randomly selected, so again, give some additional scientific credibility to the design here. Once you arrive at one of those sites, which is accessible on Google Maps, so again, we'll share those links, but once you arrive at one of those sites, we're asking people to find a safe spot along a road, a sidewalk, a pathway where they can walk, and estimate an area about 1 meter wide, which is about the length from your fingertips to the center of your chest. So estimate an area about 1 meter wide, which is about 3 feet, and then follow that path for, actually we've updated this now to 20 minutes because we realized that 30 minutes was actually giving us really, really long transects. So you just have to follow that path for 20 minutes and collect everything, collect data on everything that you see. Again, follow best practices on safety here, as well as making sure you're staying in publicly accessible areas rather than private property. All right, and then I'll run through other ways to be engaged and collect data with the app. So in addition to this formal transect method, which again is designed to be relatively accessible, all it requires is going out and walking for 20 minutes along a pathway. But we realize that there might be other times where people people have the opportunity to collect data that's outside of that very specific guidance. And we definitely welcome data collection anywhere, anytime. Wherever people are. We have lots of people who go out and collect data while they're walking their dog in the morning, and all kinds of other scenarios like that. So we're certainly very open and happy to have that opportunistic data collection as well. If the people are doing more cleanup oriented data collection, we also have people who do things like tracking in pairs or then recording everything on a site and then cleaning up the data or cleaning up the litter. And then we also have groups that might collect everything from one area, and then at a central site within like a park or something, say they'll track all the data of those litter items there. So those are also options, but again, we lose some of that geospatial granularity doing that. So the transects are kind of the gold standard, but all data is good data. This is one example of, this is from an island off the coast of Belize, where they're collecting a lot of fragment data on items that they're finding in the tide line, so typically very small fragments. And they take those back and then sort them and count them after the fact. So again, you don't get that kind of stretch of where those things are along the shoreline, but you still get this really important breakdown of what those top items are. So we'll use all of the data for in the report. The transects will be able to look at litter densities in different areas, but all data that's collected will play into our characterization that allows us to identify top items and top material types in the cities. And then finally, I'll also mention that we have the option to manually upload data through our website. So this is something that especially schools sometimes who are working with younger kids, as well as groups that are doing bigger cleanups, a lot of times find that it can be a little challenging to try to prioritize the data collection while they're doing a cleanup. So a lot of people sometimes prefer to upload data after the fact. Again, this isn't as scientifically rigorous, but still really valuable data. So with this, basically it's similar to the app where we have, you put in a number of items, you put in the item, and then you add it. And then the difference being that after the fact, you pin the location where those items are tagged to. So all of the items will be pinned in one central location where you conducted the cleanup. These guidelines for staying safe are also available in our debris tracker field guide, but obviously safety is certainly a priority, which is one of the reasons we actually don't require people to pick up the litter that they are logging with the app. Certainly that's encouraged, and we find that most people who have participated have ended up picking up the litter. But if for whatever reason, for whatever safety purposes you feel you're not able to, it's not required to pick up the litter to participate. So hopefully this is a way to mitigate any safety concerns around that. And then finally, I'll show this map very quickly of, this is actually the data that was collected in 2020 along the river, which was pretty sparse. Again, highlighting that gap in data that we have from inland areas. Last year, with the 4 pilot cities that we worked in, we had over 100,000 litter items logged along the river. So really, we're building out this data set in a way that's really exciting, and we're really happy to have Rosedale and Greenville be our next stops along the river.